Hello, my name is Jeannie. I'm a 6'2" self-projected projector. I have a defined head, posture, throat, and G-center, and they're all connected straight down the middle channels, which are all part of individual circuitry, thus making me a pure individual. As a Line 6, I'm technically supposed to be on the roof, but life had other plans. 5 years ago, I lost my mom. 4 years ago, I lost a dear friend to suicide. And 1 year ago, I lost my dad. As a Line 2 with markets environment and taste cognition, I've noticed I'm quite selective on who I let into my world. As a pure individual with a channel of structuring, if you know, you know, finding my place among the peoples has been a learning experience. After losing most of my support system, experiencing an identity crisis and existential crisis, while third-lining so many life transitions, this is me showing how I'm learning to connect with myself, create a new life, and interact with a very tribal and collective world through experimentation. Hello and welcome to today's video. I feel like it's been a minute since I filmed. I took some time off to process a few things, wasn't really feeling motivated, so I didn't really force myself. But I'm back and we're going to be starting this new series. We're going to see how long it goes because I've noticed a tendency. I don't know if it's a no motors thing or like some childhood conditioning thing where like I really have a hard time starting what I finish. But I kind of feel like it's going to be easier to stick to the vlogs because they're going to give me a space to be able to process what's been going on in my head. And hopefully it'll be also helpful for y'all if you relate or find some similarities with like my experience and your experience. Well, then hopefully, you know, it'll be mutually beneficial. So this is going to be a new series. I kind of been diving into more of like
I'm not sure I understand.
Even Siri's a little bit confused. I've been diving more into like embracing the individual circuitry part of me. As you saw in the intro, I've kind of like, okay, when I release this, it's going to be 5 years since my mom passed away. And when she passed away, like I could not even say my mother, I could say she passed away. I could say she was no longer with us. I could not say that she died. It just felt like too much, too intense. And because my mom was kind of like a really big source of safety for me, I just completely withdrew from the world. I only let the people that felt safe, which were dad and brother. After dad passed away, it was just my brother. But I realized how like I had kept people away. Like I closed myself off. I was very guarded, and this manifested in like lots of tension, lots of pain. Like physical body tension, physical pain, and I started to see like how much I missed my support system and how like I had to start to learn to open up to receiving support from different people because my people were no longer here. And that took some inner work. Like I did some inner child work, which was very, very interesting, like how that played out. I'm still going to be kind of playing with the format here while I get it right. I think I'm going to put some stuff on here on YouTube, and then more of like the how-to, the process is probably going to go up on my Patreon page just to also provide myself with another stream of income. I'm trying to think what it was called. But I do feel like it's going to be more of a low ticket offer, but the stuff that's in there I feel like it's going to be quite useful if you feel drawn to, like, you know, if you feel like the pull, just trust yourself. Again, I'm still playing with that. I'm not sure how it's going to play out in the end. But another reason for like wanting to start this vlog is also to help myself release that mental pressure, to share more about my experience, and then if you relate to it, you know, again, mutually beneficial. But also kind of really been starting to want to open up to life and to people. And having, like, being a pure individual, which if you watch my other videos, you know why the air quotes. Um, I feel like that was one of the things that really created like a lot of social trauma, or a lot of issues in my interpersonal relationships. Being aligned too, where like I feel like I do need a lot of alone time. For me personally, my like I was very, very close to my family. Doesn't mean that we didn't have like some dysfunctional stuff, but I a lot of the people that I've been meeting, and a lot of the stories that I've been hearing is how like there's a lot of like resentment towards like parents and things like that, or like a lot of blaming the parents. Personally, I never experienced that. I don't know if it's like the projector part of me that like I really saw them. And for me personally, I want to say it was like the love and the compassion of like understanding their childhoods and like what it was that led them to, you know, be the way they were. So for me personally, like I don't like I can't remember a time where like I blamed my parents for anything. But it doesn't mean that things could have done better, but it's just like nobody knew. So that's another big like reason behind the work that I want to do, because I feel like, and you guys might hear me say this a lot, like you just need to know some things and things so that you know what to do about it. And there is another piece to that, is like sometimes you know some things and things, but you don't necessarily know what to do about it. And this is where like, I don't know, I can share like what I see and my insights on what I've done, and then either you can take some of that and experiment with it, or maybe that'll trigger something within you that'll give you um, a new perspective or a new way of doing things in your own way that will help you tap into a better experience. I have 41. 41 is really big on the experience. So that's kind of like the reason, or like why, the why 61 behind this vlog. I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place, but hopefully in the end it'll all come together and make sense. But as I was saying, I really withdrew. I was very guarded. I realized like how closed my heart was. And as I'm finally like at a place where I've processed like a lot of the grief at a deeper level, I'm able to see like some of my beliefs that I had some awareness around them, but the awareness that I've had recently, especially within like this past week, has been like mind blowing. And it really feels like it was that piece that I was missing that I couldn't see before, that has really helped me shift my energy and shift my experience to where like I am seeing results so quickly. And it feels so good, because it's like, I think the like, besides, you know, losing my family, it felt like I lost my success. And you know, like for line sixes, they say like the first phase was a lot of trial and error. I share this in another video, but for me, it never really felt like that. It always felt like I had it figured out. And it wasn't until like my mom passed away, till my dad passed away, that I felt a lot of like line 3. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I have to like survive and function and work and, you know, pay bills. And it was a lot. It's a lot. It's been a lot. And I'm starting to finally like learn to connect with myself, because even though like I have a defined G center, I feel like I I don't know how to explain this, because I was having this conversation with a very dear friend of mine, who we have a lot of similarities. We have a similar incarnation cross. They're just like 1 and I'm a 2, and our experiences are like so like there's a lot of parallels that is just mind blowing. Like how much growth we've experienced just by sharing our experiences and like mirroring things back to each other. And one of the things that I realized was how, or like what we were talking about, is how like having a defined G center, like you're supposed to have like a very clear, fixed identity, direction, love, and all those things. But I was sharing how like I felt that because of the rejection I experienced, or that I perceived I was experiencing, and we're going to talk about this in a little while, I started to close myself off. And the way I explained it to my friend is like, I felt like me, like who I am at my core, it felt like a very precious part of me. And I had gotten hurt by people, and now that I look back, it's like because I was focusing on the wrong people. I was interacting with the wrong fractal, and I didn't know it back then. But I felt like the core of who I was so precious, and like these people, a lot of resentment, a lot of bitterness, they weren't appreciating it. So what I decided to do in a way to like protect myself, build up walls, build up defenses, be guarded, close off my heart, is I decided to keep this very precious part of me very hidden. And if someone wanted to get to know that precious part of me, like the core of who I was, they were going to have to work for it. And they were going to have to really show me and prove to me that they deserved to know that part of me. Now, the way I explained it to my friend is like, the way I visualize it is like, I don't feel like I was never like not my authentic self, which can kind of like, depending on how you see it, that might not be true. But I felt like there was like these layers to me. It's like there's layer 1, like let's say level 1. Everyone gets access to Genie at level 1. It's kind of like the shell, the outer shell. This is a Genie that everyone is allowed to see. This is how much access they have. And it was really small. Like it might have seemed, well, let's not go into that first. Let me keep going with this. Okay. So there was like level 1. And then there was a level 2, which I feel was like people that I felt like they were okay, like not necessarily that, not, I guess more friends, because there's like level 1 was for like people I didn't know, strangers and acquaintances, and then let's say layer 2 was more for maybe like more acquaintances and friends. And then there was like a third layer, which was like who I was around my family. Because for me, my family was a great source of safety. I feel like I was always very blessed. When my mom, like when she was telling me about like, my birth story and all that, she would always say like, I wanted you, like I wanted to have you because I felt lonely. So for me, like that was my relationship with my mom. Oh, I'm getting emotional now because like they look like 2 hawks flying over there. Okay, so I always knew I was very loved and wanted by my mom. And I was always very supported, and I was always very accepted. Like, even though she didn't know I was a projector, I felt like she knew how to guide me, which would make sense because she was a projector as well. She was just an emotional projector. And with my dad, like, even though I wasn't as close to my dad than I was to my mom, he never judged me. Like I was always very much like recognized by my family. Now there were certain things that I kept to myself, and I didn't realize that's what I was doing because as parents, like there's this whole concept of like because we depend on our caretakers for survival, like many times we prefer adapting than sticking to our authenticity. I feel like my brother struggled more with that because he was completely different. I was way more like submissive, and I think it was because of the like Gate 61. I grew up in a very religious household, and a very like common thing that I heard growing up is God expects their children to be obedient to their parents, and when you're obedient, this means life and things like that. So for me, like it made sense, so I didn't really question it. My brother is a little bit different. He was a little bit more independent, more questioning things. He was more extroverted. He's also like, he's not a projector, he's a man-gen. I tend to be like more in tune to my environment, and coming from like an immigrant background, like the way we made our way through this, like to this country, that was pretty traumatic. My whole birth story was pretty traumatic, as I'm learning. So I think for me, like, I really learned or taught myself that as long as I was with mom or family, like, I felt safe. I'm going to go more into this later, maybe inside the Patreon group. So they're like, okay, I think I got to 3 layers. And then there was, like, let's say a 4th layer, which was like my core. The 4th layer is like everything, like layer 1, 2, 3, and then plus who I am when I'm by myself. And I feel like even though I was really close to my mom, I think because of, like, we didn't know any better, there is a part of me that kind of wonders, like, how much closer could we have been if, like, we had known about, this work, and how to see how, like, our childhood experiences impacted, like, who we developed into, and, like, how can we, switch out the old programming that isn't working to one that works better. And I kind of have, like, this it's like this bittersweet feeling of, like, oh, I can't imagine how closer we would be if, I had known this sooner, but, that's just the way it happened. But that 4th layer is very, I don't think very many people have seen that core. I know I have access to it because, like, I'm me. But I feel like maybe family got to see a sense of that. Mom, dad, my brother, some boyfriends maybe, but it was still very limited. Like, I had lots of trust issues, which now I'm seeing where they come from. And I have been really working on, like, opening my heart and feeling safe, because I kept getting this comment. And with individual circuitry, there could be, like, this deafness component to it. And what I've started creating more awareness around is, like, even though it's, like, someone might say something and I'm be like, no, that's not true. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. If I hear it more than once, I'll be like, okay, hold on. Let me look into this. Is there some truth to what they're saying, even though my individual circuitry wants to tune that out? Because what I've noticed is, like, when I pay attention to that, I kind of, like, investigate it. It doesn't mean it has to be true. I've noticed, like, how my growth has been much greater, as opposed to, like, when I'm like, no, you're, like, I don't see what you're saying, you're wrong, I'm right. One of the comments that I was getting was from someone who I felt like I had really opened up with, compared to, like, the other people that only got to, like, layer 1. They said, I feel like I don't know you. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? You feel like you don't know me? Like, I've shared so much about my life to you. Like, I've shared my stories, I've shared, like, my thought process, like, what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, and you telling me, like, you feel like you don't know me? Now, part of me feels like, as only 2, it could be a little bit of a projection. So I kind of had that peace in mind of, like, wait, are they projecting onto me like that? They feel that they don't know me, and it's really like they don't know themselves. And I kind of have a feeling they might have an undefined G center, so I don't know. And then there was another person, another friend, who made a comment along the lines of, like, you make it so difficult for people to get to know you. And when it was through a message, when I read that, I was like, I paused and I felt into that. I'm like, okay, why are they picking up on this? And in a way too, like, I felt like it was a little bit of a projection, where I feel like I don't know this friend as well, even though, like, they're one of, like, the closest, or one of the persons I let a little bit in closer. But I also feel like I didn't know a lot about her life. I didn't know what they were going through or things like that. So I kind of took a little bit, okay, it's a little bit of the projection field I'm feeling, but I'm also feeling like, okay, let me see if I can see this differently. What's going on here? So as I was kind of, like, looking into that, that's where I realized, oh, there's been, like, these different layers of me that I've given different people different access to those layers. And I wasn't seeing it, because the thing is, like, I always have access to that 4th layer. I'm always in tune to it. So when people say, I feel like I don't know you, it's like, okay, wait a minute, do they have access to that 4th layer? no, they don't. Or maybe I think they do, but maybe there's more, you know. And it's not just that, it's like energetically, I was kind of emitting the signal of like, you don't get to know all of me. Because that's how I protect myself, that's how I stay safe. Um, and there's a lot of factors in my chart, and it's not just the individual circuitry, it's the line too, having so much openness in my centers where I take on so much from my environment, experiencing rejection, perceiving rejection, all these things like really compounded and led me to like, you know, be closed off energetically, which is why I was getting, you know, all these responses. So as I started feeling into that and starting to tap into like, okay, that fourth layer, how can I start letting out some of that fourth layer into the world and trust that I'm not going to be hurt, and that if I do get hurt, I'm going to be able to handle it, like I can process it. And by keeping like that core of me just to myself or to like my immediate family or like whoever I'm in a relationship with, what I'm really doing is like I'm depriving myself of the joy of connecting with people. So when I started seeing it that way, I'm like, okay, I think I want to play with this a little bit differently. So it's about getting really comfortable with like who I am, deconditioning that G center, which is as a self-projected projector, is so important. And I've been seeing like so many results that it's like it's been feeling really, really good, and it's been happening kind of quickly too. So yeah, I have more to say about that, but I'm probably going to put that up on my Patreon, which is more of a little bit of the how-to. So yeah, that's kind of like where I feel like I'm going with this vlog. It's like giving myself experiments, like real life experiments of like how to interact with people, because one of the things with individual circuitry is that I can lack social skills, and I feel like mom was able to help me like to learn those social skills, and now that there really isn't a mom, it's kind of like more me and the world. So that's going to be an experiment, but I feel like I can do this, like just strategy and authority, right? Like this is gonna be good, this is good, we're gonna do this, okay? I'm gonna kind of take you all along on the journey, share my stories and things like that. And I want to talk a little bit about like what I named this. I don't know if the name is going to be changing, but for now it feels like this is the name for now. I was originally going to call this like Genie Meets World, but then when I felt into that, I'm like, that doesn't sound like a very pure individual thing of me to do, because like one of the things with pure individual being a pure individual or individual circuitry is that you have to get really comfortable with being yourself. That's the whole point of like you being yourself is going to help others be like, you know, empower others to be themselves. And this is how mutation, this is how change, this is how all the good things come into the world, by you being yourself. And that takes a lot of like courage and like really getting comfortable with who you are at your core and being comfortable being that with yourself and with others. Okay, so when I felt like I was doing like Genie Meets World, it felt like I was more again trying to mold myself into more of a tribal or collective being, which even though like my 41, I think 41 is a collective energy, I still am like I'm much more individual. And I've noticed this, like I've recently been in this group program to like mind body connection program, which I'm excited to like start offering that service as well. But what I noticed is that in this group, it's very tribal, it's very collective, like the way it's taught, like it's very like flowy and receptive. There's not a lot of structure, and there's like this whole huge part of it of like being very community based, very like interacting with people. And I feel like I felt a little bit like intimidated and felt like I don't know if I can do this, because like I just don't feel like I have the people skills yet. And the thing is, like, in a way, like, I'm technically, like, not supposed to have them, but I do feel like you can learn in order to make that transition a little bit smoother, which is, you know, some of the things that I'm going to talk about in these vlogs. But I started to notice how, like, it was a little bit uncomfortable, and I was starting to question myself for signing up, because I was feeling like I was I was feeling like I didn't belong, like I couldn't find my place, I couldn't find my structure, I couldn't find how to implement what it is that I was supposed to do with the information. I couldn't find my process yet. I couldn't find the pattern yet. So I feel like for me it takes quite some time to absorb the information and then to be able to integrate it and then see my own way of doing things. But I caught myself like wanting to do things like the group. And then I reminded myself, you're a pure individual, like you're not supposed to just absorb the information and trust that you're going to make it your own. But I did start to feel a whole lot of other things, which I think I'm going to talk about like in another video, not today. Today I kind of want to wrap up with this comment that this DM that someone sent me, who they also have a lot of individual circuitry, and they are a third line. So they're saying, I'm reading from their message, it says, sometimes I feel I need to make more effort to maintain those relationships, like with individual, with someone tribal. Actually, as a projector, don't initiate meetings or things like that. But their family told them that if they want friendships, they need to put the effort in. But it doesn't come naturally for them, and they feel guilty. Sometimes they long for other people to invite them out, but they don't do that in return, and they're scared that they're too much or too open or too intense for them, so it feels really lonely sometimes. And then they said recently they had this insight that they need to be more distant, because if they don't, they can't see the border where they lose themselves and other people. They have an undefined spleen. And they said, I really resonated with what you said about who we call friends, and if that has the same meaning for both sides. Sometimes I feel that my meaning is so specific that it's hard to call someone a friend. So I related so much to what they were saying, because I did answer, they asked this question, but I feel like I didn't have enough details, so I wasn't doing it justice, like answering the question. But after they gave me this, I'm like, okay, yes, I can absolutely see where you're coming from, my love. I related so much to this, so this is kind of like the thing that I wanted to address in this first video. The only difference here is that I feel like my family didn't pressure me to seek out people if it didn't feel right. Like, they encouraged me, but then if I felt like, no, I want to go home, like when I was maybe around my preteens, there was a sleepover that I got invited to, and I was excited to go, but once I was there, like, I felt like I couldn't do it. So I called my mom, and she picked me up, and like after I made the call, my friend's mom, the one we were going to be sleeping at her house, she said, oh, I knew Jeannie wasn't going to be able to do it. Kind of like I knew she was going to chicken out. That's how I took it. And I felt so bad, because like I did want to go, but I just felt like I wasn't going to be able to handle it. And it was true, like my nervous system just wasn't there. It didn't feel safe. So I felt like I did try, like I did put my part, but I did make an effort. I wasn't necessarily pressured by family to do so, because then if that didn't work out, it's like, okay, it's okay. If you don't have to go there if you don't feel comfortable. Let's go out and do something that you want. And then they would take me, wherever it is that I wanted to do, or wherever I wanted to go, whatever I wanted to do. I was an only child back then, so a lot of the attention, a lot of the focus was on me. And, my mom was really, I was like her priority. So she didn't mind spending time with me. She loved spending time with me. I loved spending time with her. So I felt like, again, I resorted to family, but I understand like that's not everybody's dynamic. But there are things that we can do to kind of tweak that. I believe that the person who sent this message is also a self-projected projector. Now, even though they said they don't initiate meetings, what I have noticed is that sometimes we can close off energetically to receiving invitations, and sometimes we can have beliefs that can not allow those invitations to get through to us. And what I've also noticed, that even though I'm a projector and technically I'm supposed to wait for an invitation, I find that there's a lot of people in my life who if I reach out to them and ask for an invitation, it's usually a very quick automatic yes. It's like they're waiting for me. So even though the projector's strategy is to wait for an invitation, I would invite you to play with the concept of like, is there someone that you can think of that you would like to have lunch with, or you would like to go to the movies with, or whatever it is that you like to do? Can you think of someone and experiment with reaching out and asking for an invitation? Hey, I'm thinking of like, I don't know, I've been craving sushi, or I've been craving this, or there's this new spot that opened up. Would you like to come with me and try and check it out? And then see what happens, okay? Again, you might have to tweak your energy a little bit to, don't send that invitation or like ask for that invitation without, or with the expectation that it is going to be a no. Again, a little bit more like open heart, open energy type of thing, and see what happens. And I can definitely relate to the guilt. And I think that maybe that part that I mentioned about how like there were these different layers of myself that I created might resonate with you, and just kind of like feel into that and see if there have been like the core of who you are, like how open have you been to sharing that with others. And if you haven't felt open before, like don't feel bad about that. Like I think it's a very intuitive, natural thing for us to do in order to like minimize the trauma and the pain and all that stuff. So I don't necessarily see it like as a bad thing. I just see it, that's what I did in order to like survive and protect myself and things like that. And now it's like I want to experience something different. I want to experience more connection, and I want to, now that I know about like fractals and focusing like on the right people who do recognize me, people who do who will want to invite me, that changes things. Because before I took rejection very personally. When you have a defined G center, that's something that's very common. It can literally feel like a stab to the heart because we have that defined G center. So once, like if I find myself taking something like really to heart where I'm like, oh, that kind of hurt a little bit, I'm like, okay, it's just my defined G center that's, hurting because it's defined, and I have a really strong sense of self. So whenever someone like says no, it can feel like, they're saying no to me, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. We can tweak our perception so that we can, continue going through life with an open heart and, not feel like we have to guard ourselves all the time. And there is this longing, like when it can feel very lonely. And even though, like for me, I know for a very long time, I kind of like soothed myself and kind of like told myself, well, I don't really need them anyways. It's not like I wanted them anyways, but I had my family that I could go to and that I didn't feel as alone. But once the family was gone, I was like, holy heavens, now I really do feel alone. And in part, it's about learning to connect with ourselves. In a way, like if we're having trouble with connecting with people, or we're noticing that our connection with other people isn't as deep as we'd like it, in a way, and I know this can be very hard to hear because like it was hard for me to hear, but I'm like I'm willing to try something different. I'm willing to do my part. In a way, that is mirroring the lack of connection we have with ourselves. So again, it's about getting to the core of who we are, what we like, what we want. With like you as a self-projector I feel like many times it can be like very like ego and vibe, because like there's ego projectors or like ego authorities, and the recommendations for them is to be selfish. I feel like that selfishness also applies for self-projected authorities, because like there's the heart center and there's the ego center. They're both heart centers. They're just a little bit different because like I think that's the one that's split into two. So there is kind of like this component of like learning to be selfish. What do I want? But it's not being selfish and making that mean that it's not going to be a win-win-win for everyone. Because normally what we tend to do, or like the conditioning we have, is that if we're selfish, that means it's a win-lose situation. No, we can change that. When we become selfish in the sense of like, what do I want, especially like if you've been so used to putting other people before you, sometimes when I ask myself, well, what do I want? Like, I don't know. I kind of never really asked myself that before, because like I put other people's needs before mine, and it's not that mine weren't necessarily important. It's just they weren't as important. So I kind of took the back seat, and I see myself repeating this pattern in different parts of life. So, okay, if I want a different experience, what can I do differently? So it's about learning to, what do I want? Where do I want to eat? What do I want to eat? Where do I want to go? Do I feel like, going for a walk, tuning into that G center, which is love, direction, self. Try playing with those three aspects, those three keynotes, and see what you come up with, whether it's through journaling or, processing out loud or things like that. Because, where I was going with this is that the loneliness, I really started feeling the loneliness more after my family, my mom and dad weren't here anymore, and I realized, oh, okay, that support system that you're so used to seeing, you're so used to like it looking this way, it's not coming back, my love. It's just the way it is. So you either have to open up to other people and be willing to receive support from, not having it be so focused on like these two people, just these two people. And also kind of like tweaking it so that it doesn't create like these codependent tendencies, and like learning to again, get connection from like a variety of people, which as a line 2 might be a little bit difficult, because we tend to be, I'm line 2 taste and markets environment, which tends to be like very, very selective. So I'm learning to kind of like loosen up, or not be so like very super selective. Still be selective, but also be open to trying a different variety of things while I find the new combination, or the right balance for me during this next stage. And this is going to shift, like, as right now I'm not in a relationship. I don't have a lot of responsibilities other than taking care of myself, work and things like that. So I have a lot of time freedom. If and when I decide to embark on a relationship, that it's going to change, because it's a new person, like it's a whole individual, another person coming into the mix, where it's not just like, me, it's them, it's me, it's them, it's us. Okay, so I think sometimes if it's a defined head, defined ajna thing, I can get really fixed of like, this is how it looks like, and then like, oh yeah, circumstances change, so this is going to require for things to be done a little bit differently, or look a little bit differently, and kind of like, again, helping rewire the brain to like new ways of doing things. And another thing that I'm going to touch on, I think maybe the final thing here, is that how this person was mentioning that they need to be distant because they can't see like where they end and someone else begins. And this is something that's very, very typical for projectors, especially because our aura is so penetrating, and when we have a lot of open centers, it can be quite destabilizing to be around so many people, because if we don't have boundaries, if we don't have energetic boundaries, how much self-power we have, and these other components can really impact like how much we're taking in. So that is something that I could talk about more, like how to. Again, I probably will put that in my Patreon, but that's going to come in another video after this. I'm going to go eat because I'm starting to get hungry, so I probably won't film that until another day. But I will let y'all know like when I start putting stuff up on my Patreon page. So it's about creating those boundaries and awareness around how to distinguish between what's yours and what's not. Because especially like what I've noticed is that my spleen is quite sensitive, and the spleen is like very survival based, so it can be like, sometimes it's so much easier and better to like not have to deal with that when there's a lot of people. But I am learning how to tweak certain things so that it doesn't feel as intense. I'm learning to regulate my nervous system, which are things that I can talk more about. And yeah, this last thing where they said like, I had mentioned, I did a live on Instagram where I mentioned like how for me, like this label of friend is very like intimate and personal, and I tend to make this distinction between acquaintances and friends. Acquaintances are like people that I know, but I don't know much about their lives, and then friends are more that people that I know more about like what's going on for them, what they're moving through. We communicate more regularly and things like that. But what I was noticing is that acquaintances were considering me a friend while I was only considering them an acquaintance. And I really didn't have friends because I got, again, so firm with like who I let in, that I started to ask myself, like, why are these acquaintances, people that I am considering acquaintances, seeing me as a friend, and I'm not seeing them as friends, I'm seeing them as acquaintances. And again, it kind of relates back to like closing off and not letting people in, and kind of like maybe loosening, define head, define Ajna, my definition of what a friendship is. And I think what I was doing is I was making like friends be more like family. So now it's more like shifting into friends, acquaintances slash friends to like friends slash family. Because again, like family for me was very like safe, very like these are my people, this is my home team, these are the people that I can call whenever and they will be there for me. And I don't necessarily feel that same vibe from acquaintances. But then, there are friends who don't necessarily live close to me, but like if I need to soundboard something, I'll be like, hey, I need to vent about something, or I need to process something, are you available? And I'll drop it in and then they'll answer whenever, but I have that space. What I am looking for is like a physical person, because I feel like that does make a difference, which is where the relationship would come in. So that's going to be a whole interesting experience that I'm sure we're all going to learn from. But yeah, okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up here for now. And more of like, let's see, hold on. Okay, let me address this thing. They mentioned how like sometimes they need to make more of an effort to maintain those relationships, especially like because the thing with like tribal and collective people is like that's something that's so natural for them, and they don't understand the individual. And I feel like as an individual, it's easier for me to understand like a tribal or collective person, but it's not easy for them to understand me, and this is where like bitterness and resentment can come in, you know. And before, like, relationships really used to feel like an effort, and now I'm learning to like kind of drop that energy of like this has to be hard, to more of like something that feels playful, something that is like, no, I am worthy of having friends who do recognize me. Because before, my experience kind of created this pattern of this belief of like nobody recognizes me, or not a lot of people recognize me, or the majority of people don't recognize me. So that was more of what I was getting of. So now it's about tweaking my energy and seeing how like when I get really squeaky clean, that gets mirrored back to me very quickly. Very, very quickly. I start seeing shifts very quickly. So I'm learning. Okay. My phone died. The battery ran out, and when I turned it back on, I'm like, oh my gosh, it did not save. Turns out it did save, so thankfully, because it was like 45 minutes of me talking. But there are a few more things that I wanted to share before I close this off. I was talking about effort. I don't feel like friendships and relationships are supposed to feel like hard work, okay? And I'm not saying that they don't require intention and time and connection and things like that. Like I think like every healthy relationship will require that, like nurturing, and communication and things like that. But I don't like the idea, because like I don't know, when I think of effort, I think of like hard work. And I think I always go back to like the relationship I had with my mom, where like it felt effortless. So that's kind of like my frame of reference. And if you haven't experienced a relationship like that, well then, it might be a little bit more difficult to kind of like feel into what an experience like that would be like. But yeah, this is something like I do want to go a little bit deeper into, because I see how like I've been taking my relationship with my mom, because like that's what's really familiar to me, and kind of like using some aspects of that relationship in order to like feel into the type of person I want to call in, and kind of taking a look at like past relationships, what worked, what didn't work, what I learned, what I would never do again. Some aspects of like, yeah, okay, that was nice, you know, but for the most part it's like very third line behavior, and I definitely have learned my lessons. But I don't think, I don't know, I just don't like the idea of like friendships and effort. I believe in and this kind of like has to do with like attracting the fractal that's going to recognize you and invite you if you're a projector, and really kind of like it's not going to feel like effort. And I guess like besides my mom, like right now I have a friendship with she calls us like alpha twins because we have similar incarnation cross. It doesn't feel like there's effort in this dynamic. Like we have a chat in like Telegram, and our voice notes are literally like, I don't, they're usually anywhere from like 5 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 22 minutes long. And in the beginning, like when we were starting to, you know, exchange experiences and things like that and start to connect and share, I feel like there was a lot of guilt on both our parts for like how long we were talking. And then we kind of like started to remind each other that it was safe to take up space, because even though like some of the voice notes are like 15-20 minutes long, like they don't seem like that they're that long, because it's just like we get so much from the conversation that again, like it feels really, really good. We're learning from each other. We're kind of like, you know, and it's not like necessarily that we talk every single day. Like sometimes there are days where like we talk every single day, and then sometimes there are like gaps where like it could be like a few days. I think the longest gap we've had was like maybe like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that, where like I was waiting because they said, okay, let me get back to you on this because like I'm super tired and I can't think. Then it was like around New Year's, and then they didn't really drop anything in until like mid-January or something like that. And I was like, well, I've just kind of been over here waiting for you because like you said you would get back to me, and they're like, oh my God, I forgot. I'm like, well, you know, it's okay. Like I've been, you know, it's not like I'm sitting around waiting. But it's really this dynamic where like there's so much acceptance of like who each other are, that it doesn't matter like how much time goes by, you know, the support is there. Like if they need to soundboard something, you know, the invitation is always open. If I need to soundboard something, the invitation is open. There's like, if someone starts apologizing for how long the notes are, like we state, we don't apologize for how long we talk. Like we take up space in here, you know, and it's okay. Like there's no need to apologize. So I really feel like when you find your fractal, when you find your people, it doesn't feel like effort. Like the energy is there. And especially as a projector, if you're not being recognized, the energy's not going to be there. And I would invite you to think back to like an instance where you did feel recognized. It's really trippy because it's like the energy is there. Like I remember I had a friend of a friend reach out to me because they were wanting to they were wanting help with the trigger, a recent trigger they experienced, and it was late at night. I don't remember if it was past midnight, and I was tired. I was getting ready to go to sleep, or feeling into like, did I want to go to sleep or did I want to work a little bit because I hadn't done any work that day. Maybe it was sooner than that. Maybe it was around 11 at night. So they asked if I was available to talk for a little bit, and it's like I started to get energy even though like I felt a little bit tired. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go for like I didn't tell them this is me Sunday setting my energetic standard of like, okay, I'm gonna go work for a little while they're voice noting me back. I'll work while I'm waiting for that. But I felt like that burst of energy because there was recognition, there was an invitation. So when we have recognition, when we have an invitation, the energy will be there, and it's not going to feel like effort. It's not going to feel hard. And if your other family members are not as understanding, or they're not projectors, they might not get it. Okay, so it's about one, learning how we operate. I don't buy it until that projectors aren't here to see themselves. I think that like we do have our blind spots, because recently, like as I've been working with a few more people, I've been able to see these areas a lot more clearly. And I think there's something very powerful with working like projector with projector, because we see so deeply that it's like we can mirror these really deep things back and forth to each other, and it can be like a very expansive place where we can experience a lot of growth really quickly. And you know, when we connect with like the right projector, they're gonna get it, and it can feel so validating and so good to just like have a conversation with someone who gets it. And even though like the experience might not be exactly the same, at some level like you get it, and there's like so much value and like so much power in that. So I kind of want to put that out there, like if something is feeling like it's an effort, like a relationship or a friendship or something like that, I don't necessarily say like you have to, you know, cut that friendship off. You can do things like energetically with you and see how that gets reflected back. Sometimes, you know, the best thing is just to kind of like, you know, create more space for the people that do feel really supportive, and like it doesn't feel like enough, really create space for them to come in. So you can start getting a taste or a feel for what that's like. And once you start saying, oh, this is how it works, like it's going to be easier to draw those people in, or meet them. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then I don't think I finished my, like, why I was calling this World Meets Genie. So we'll circle back to that, and then I'll close this off. But I thought about naming it Genie Meets World, but I'm like, that's not very like pure individual in nature. I've been learning to, or contemplating like how to embrace more of like that individual circuitry aspect of me. And it's more of like the world is meeting the pure individual. It's like I am creating more awareness on ways in ways in which I still want to kind of like behave more tribal and collective in nature. And so like, no, remember, individual. There's a reason behind this pure individual aspect. And can we drop the beliefs that are not gonna serve me and serve others? And can we create like really empowering beliefs that are gonna help me kind of like really embody that aspect of my design, my chart of like empowering others? And before we can like really truly empower people, it's about learning to empower ourselves and really like accept and own who we are. So that's kind of like how I wanted to open up this series. I'm gonna see if right after this I film a little bit more on the how-to part. I think I'm also gonna share like my birth story and what I've been learning from like diving deep and kind of like seeing how that original like birthing experience shaped a lot of my life. But I think that's again something that's gonna go up on my Patreon. So if you feel like that's something that might be interesting to hear me talk about, again, I'm gonna post down below when that content is available on my Patreon. And yeah, that's it for now. Oh no, my phone died. So okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna see if any of that's saved. Otherwise, we're gonna have to redo this. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you follow along in this vlog series, and I will see you next time. If you have any comments, questions, feel free to drop them down below, and I will maybe address some of them in future videos. If you want to follow along on my other stuff, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is @GenieSalcedo. There and on my website, you can find more ways of working with me. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.